die war doch schon mit Gravy beschmiert als an dem Tag. Also wenn er die weiß, dass da eine hübsche Frau drauf war, muss er schon vor dem Mord da gewesen sein. Misty Faye, naturally, clad in her stunning Japanese garb, surrounded by the hue and aroma of Western tastes. Western tastes? Could he find a stranger way to describe gravy?
So from there you headed for the prep room.
Wait a sec. What did Godot say just now? I think I just found his proverbial weak spot. There's only one thing of any importance here. Where was Godot when the murder was taking place? Oh, muss ich jetzt... Ich nehme an, ich muss die Rolle präsentieren, aber wo? Ups, ganz am Schluss? Oder ist das wieder was wie mit dem Schnee, wo ich das am Ende woanders präsentieren muss? Pearly was also stuck und das letzte nur dazu da war, mir die Information zu geben. Wo würde das denn mit der Rolle passen? Pearly was stuck on the inner temple side that night. Next morning she looked around but couldn't find anyone, okay? Next day, when the bridge was finally fixed, she was in the spare prep room. That's when Mr. Godot arrived at the inner temple for the first time. Ich würde es mal hier versuchen. Weil er hat ja gesagt, beautiful woman, das kannst du ja hier nicht mehr sehen. Das geht ja nur wirklich nur hier. Ich sage... Mr. Godot, the first time you crossed Dusky Bridge and went into the inner temple was long before the murder took place. Why do you say that? Because he just made one fatal slip-up. The hanging scroll in the training hall.
Hanging scroll?
But Mr. Godot is right. That scroll shows a picture of my mother. Maya, I know you know who it is, but here's something you didn't know. By the time the bridge had been repaired 2 days after the murder, the hanging scroll in the training hall looked like this.
What's that wonderfully delicious smell?
The morning after the crime, someone covered it with gravy. Gravy? But why gravy, Nick? Well, that's a long story, because gravy was much more than a condiment to the culprit. Well, Mr. Godot, if you really hadn't seen the hanging scroll until after the murder, you wouldn't have had any way of knowing that it was Misty Faye. Wait a minute, Nick. Yes? To take another look at the hanging scroll. Look, at the top, there's a crest there. Oh, that. It's the mark of the master, correct? Exactly. So if you know the meaning of the mark...
Then you could guess that it was a picture of Misty Faye on there.
Ja, aber er hat beautiful woman oder sowas gesagt. True, but Mr. Godot described what was underneath like this. Clad in her stunning Japanese garb, surrounded by the hue and aroma of Western tastes, genau. Oh. Yes, it's possible that he knew what the crest meant. However, he couldn't have known that she was wearing Japanese clothing. Mr. Godot, on the day of the murder, you were hiding at the inner temple long before the crime took place. Can I ask you just one little thing, Tried? What is it? This whole theory of yours, it all rests on a certain assumption. That I knew beforehand that a crime was going to be committed. But that's right. Otherwise, there's no reason for him to sneak onto the crime scene. Of course Mr. Godot knew about the plan. Huh?
What did you say? Is it really possible that another person knew of that plan?
Offenbar. Was soll ich denn jetzt präsentieren? Ich meine, okay, der Plan war in einem Brief. Hat er den Brief gefunden? Attorney Badge, genau. Oder soll ich eine Person präsentieren? Vielleicht hat er irgendwie die abgehört, wobei da gab es ja jetzt kein wirkliches Indiz für. Temple, Hanging Scroll, Release, Wood, Weather Data, Ichishito, Autopsy Report, Fax, Photocrime, Photo, Sketch, Whistle 4, Master, Teleman. Oh, scheiße, guck mal, da steht Opened Once Before. Das habe ich schon wieder ganz vergessen. Wer hat das denn nochmal gesagt? Ach, ich glaube, hat Pearls das nicht gesagt, dass das Ding schon einmal offen war? Aha. Opened once before. Da haben wir es doch. Das muss es sein. This crime was actually planned over a year ago. Morgan Fay authored the plan for her daughter's future, and these instructions were hidden somewhere in Fay Manor for a year. However, by the time Little Pearls found these instructions, they had already been unsealed.
Unsealed?
Yes, the killer had read these instructions long before Pearls ever found them. That's how he knew the crime was to take place at the inner temple. And you still insist this crafty killer is me? You bet I do. But you just said that the instructions were hidden. That's right. Mr. Godot couldn't have known where the instructions were hidden. If he really wanted to know, he had one great chance to find out.
Yes, and when was that?
During a visit. A visit? Morgan Fay told her daughter, Pearl, about where the instructions were hidden. During one of her visits to the detention center. That would be the only time for someone to have learned where they were hidden.
Eavesdropping on a visit at the detention center?
Yes, it could be arranged if you were someone with easy access in and out of there. Like, for example, a prosecutor such as Mr. Godot.
Order, order, order! But Mr. Godot, you're under fire again.
This murder could not have been carried out without prior knowledge. And you were the only one that could have acquired this information before the murder. Humans are afraid of the dark, and yet, at the same time we're fascinated and bewitched by it. Maybe that's why humans drink the darkness that is coffee. Sorry for always asking, but what does that mean? It means there's a reason for everything. According to your theory, the killer in this case eavesdropped on a conversation during a jail visit where he learned of a hidden plan for a crime. After discovering the plans, he hid in the inner temple and waited for the crime to occur. Then he ultimately took a person's life. And he did all of that just to protect this witness. Ich speichere mal lieber, ich habe irgendwie das Gefühl, da kommt irgendeine Frage. That's right. Das kann natürlich sein, dass er das alles gemacht hat, um Maya zu beschützen. Klar. Ach so. Er hat zugehört, also da mitgelauscht, hat dann den Brief gefunden und hat erfahren, dass der Plan war, Maya zu töten. Und ist deswegen dahin gegangen, um zu verhindern, dass Maya getötet wird. Was dann leider darin endete, dass er die Person, die gerade kurz davor war, Maya abzustechen, selber abstechen musste. Und vielleicht versucht Maya, ihn deswegen zu beschützen. That's right. If you're accusing me of this crime, I have to ask you, why would I do this? This girl is nothing but a stranger to me. Wahrscheinlich aus demselben Grund wie Dahlia, nur andersrum. Auch wegen Mia. I've got no reason to go through that kind of trouble to protect her. I am what you see. I am certainly not the type to rescue the damsel in distress.
The killer's behavior is certainly extreme, for lack of a better word. Even considering that the killer wanted to protect this witness's life, his behavior is still a little too unnatural.
However, you had a good reason, didn't you, Mr. Godot? An unshakable reason that forced you to protect this witness at all costs. I knew it. You figured it out, haven't you, Nick? Maya, I guess you were doing your best to cover for Godot. For the same reason, huh? Okay, tried. I'm all ears. Let's hear it. Also wollte er im Grunde nur die Schwester seiner Geliebten beschützen? It's very simple. Maya Fey is a lot more than just a stranger to you.
What's this?
There's one person who lies at the very center of this whole story. One person that ties you and Maya Fey together inextricably. There's a very good reason why Maya Fey's life is so precious to you. After all, she is Mia Fey's only sister. Mia Fey. You once worked alongside her. That was when you were a defense attorney.
Wait a second here. Mr. Godot is a defense attorney?
With your honor's piercing intellect, you must have figured it out by now. The real name of this man who calls himself Godot. His real name is Diego Armando. Isn't that right? The last time someone called me by that name was over 6 years ago.
Diego Armando, that name rings a bell.
It should, Your Honor. All of this is related to a single case. A case in which a convict named Terry Falls killed himself. Mia Fey's first time in court, the tragic outcome left a deep wound in her heart. She knew that behind it all was a heartless, scheming demoness in disguise, but in the end, Mia couldn't tear off that disguise. However, there was one man who reached out to help her. Diego Armando, the senior defense attorney at the office where Mia worked.
It's my fault. It's all my fault that Mr. Falls killed himself.
Mia, you can't cry yet. Ganz vergessen, das hat er ja gemacht. The only time a lawyer can cry is when it's all over. I was moved by her. The way she put all her faith in her clients, that pure, sweet heart of hers. That's why I could never forgive Dahlia Hawthorne. Mia and I thoroughly investigated that fake kidnapping incident. Then one fateful day, Dahlia wanted to meet with me. It had been 6 months since the trial. We met in the courthouse cafeteria.
Oh, I just remembered. 6 years ago, right here in this courthouse, you were poisoned.
Even I didn't see it coming. Dahlia Hawthorne slipped some poison into my coffee.
Some newspapers at the time called it a murder, but very little information about the case was released to the press.
But you weren't dead at all. No official reports ever actually called it a murder. I was just in a deep, deep coma. I see. My body shut down and my life became nothing but a long, deep sleep. That woman's poison did a real number on my central nervous system. I lost my sight, and all of my hair turned white due to the damage it caused.
That's terrible.
Apparently there was a miracle that I ever regained consciousness. 5 years had passed since I drank that poison brew. Then one morning, my eyes flew open from the smell of a doctor's cup of coffee.
For 5 years? You were asleep for 5 years.
And the worst possible news was waiting for me. Mia Fey was dead. From the very moment I opened my eyes, I had already lost everything I thought I had. The woman I loved had been murdered, and the woman I loathed had been sentenced to death.
The woman you loathed?
The woman who had spiked my scalding hot coffee, Dahlia Hawthorne. Good old Mia. She didn't let me down. She got her revenge before she checked out. In the end, there wasn't anyone waiting for me when I woke up.
That's so sad.
For someone like me, for someone who had slept away their best days, there were only 2 reasons left to live, and it was for those 2 reasons that I decided to become a prosecutor. If I may ask, what were your 2 reasons to live? The first was you, Tri.
Huh? Me?
If I hadn't drank that stupid poison, Mia Fey never would have died, much less the way she did. You were the only one who was there to protect her, but you let her die. It was all your fault. It wasn't like that. I wanted to see for myself what kind of a man you really were.
So that's why you became a prosecutor?
My other reason for living. She goes by the name of Mia Fey.
Huh? You mean me?
You were the only way I could make up for the sin of not saving Mia. 1 year ago, when the Kurain village incident was resolved, It was obvious that Morgan Fay was planning something. Whatever her evil plan was, I was determined to stop it. My role as a prosecutor put me in the perfect position to do something about her. That's how you overheard Pearl's visit with Morgan at the detention center. I knew that the time was drawing near. Since I knew the plan, I thought I could foil it. My goal was to outwit the plan. I thought if I could do that, I could keep that girl from being caught up in it. That makes sense. If Pearls had known that the actual purpose of the plan was to kill Maya, she never would have helped out. Finally, the day of the plan was drawing near. I contacted both of my accomplices.
Accomplices?
Iris of Hazakura Temple and Misty Fay. Oh shit, beide. I especially needed the help of Iris. She was to take the fall in my backup plan in case we couldn't control Pearl Fay.
But how did you contact my mother?
She had been missing for almost 20 years. Officially, yes.
What? What do you mean officially?
You've heard about it, haven't you? About the strong ties between the main family and the government. Now that you mention it, Bikini did say something to that effect. She said that the Master of Kurain had great authority. Even without her official position, Misty Fay still wielded great influence. The police have been keeping an eye on her movements all this time. That's how I was able to contact her. Again, because of my position as a prosecutor.
So my mother was cooperating with you.
Don't ever forget, no matter how far away from you she was, she never stopped thinking about you.
She was always.
That's why I knew she would do anything to protect you. If you want to know how strong her resolve to protect you was, look at her staff.
Her staff? The one with a sword in it.
The day the plan was to be carried out arrived soon enough. We met for the first time at Hazakura Temple. That's when your mother showed me her special staff. I realized it then, just how far she was willing to go. She was ready to use that sword to protect you from Morgan Fay if necessary. Yes, even if it meant paying the ultimate price.
Mother.
That night, the night of the crime, there was just one way to stop Morgan's evil plan. You mean Pearls, don't you? We had to make sure she didn't channel Dahlia Hawthorne.
Well, Pearls, what are you going to do tonight?
Deswegen, mich hat das sowieso schon gewundert, warum die so an Pearls klebte an dem Abend. Vor allem, weil ich schon wusste, dass das Misty Fay ist und mich hat es gewundert, warum sie da nicht eher Zeit mit Maya verbringt.
Well, if you'd like, you can come to my room. Perhaps we can read some books together.
We thought we could prevent her from playing her part in Morgan's plan, but she never showed up.
She was worried and followed me to the inner temple.
That was the thing we were most afraid of, and that's why Misty Fay had to do the channeling herself. She channeled Dahlia Hawthorne into her own body.
What do you mean?
If she channeled the spirit first, then Pearls wouldn't be able to do it herself. As Master of Kurain, Misty Fay's power was supreme, so that's how it went down. She channeled Dahlia Hawthorne so that Pearl Fay wouldn't be able to.
What? Is this true?
My role in the plan was to make sure no one was going to hurt Maya Fay. That's why I hid myself at the inner temple. Na, Pearls sollte doch Dahlia channeln, weil Pearls noch zu jung war, um zu verstehen, was passieren sollte. Und weil Pearls halt die einzige war, die auf den Brief von Morgan Fay hören würde. Ich meine, wenn Morgan Fay Maya so einen Brief geschickt hätte, kannst du ja auch denken, was passiert wäre. Die hätte natürlich bestimmt nicht drauf gehört. Die hat den Brief ja an Pearls geschickt, beziehungsweise versteckt für Pearls, weil Pearls die einzige war, die auf sie hören würde. Ja, es wäre vielleicht gar nicht so verkehrt gewesen, wenn die einfach mal mit Pearls geredet hätten. Aber die dachten offenbar, so geht's besser. That's why I hid myself at the inner temple. Just in case you needed to be saved from Dahlia Hawthorne. Godot. Anyway, that's all I'm going to admit to. There's no doubt about it. You're a great defense attorney. Ich habe gerade aus Versehen was vom Text weggeklickt. But you're going to have to do the rest yourself.
The background leading up to this incident has been laid bare. There's just one question remaining, Mr. Wright. Who killed the victim? There are only two possible suspects right now. Maya Fey. And I'm sad to say, you, Mr. Godot.
Well tried. If you're the real deal, then finish this thing once and for all. Show us beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can finish this on your own.
No, Nick. Please don't.
Maya.
I heard the whole thing from my sister in the medical office. That's why I have to protect Mr. Godot. I can't do it. Can't testify against him. After all, he's the man who put his life on the line to protect Mia. And me too.
Maya, I know that.
Nick.
But even so, it doesn't absolve him of his crime. Please, Maya, testify.
Miss Fey, your testimony, please.
This is the final testimony. Don't bother trying to hide anything, because I'll know. I want to hear the truth from your own lips.
I understand. I'm sure you're right. I'm ready now, Nick.
All right, young lady, tell us about the moments before you lost consciousness. What exactly happened at the time of the murder?
Just before it happened, I think I saw some red lights.
3 of them. Oh ja, wer könnte das wohl sein?
I thought I'd ask for help, but just then I was splattered with blood. She wasn't dead though, and she struck back at the enemy behind her. Suddenly, the red lights went out and the whole area was dark. Just at that moment, there was a horrible scream. Right after that, Dahlia collapsed and I lost consciousness.
These red lights. I thought you said you don't remember seeing them.
I'm sorry. I thought I saw them, but then they disappeared all of a sudden.
Huh. Things break, right? Even the best of theories. Who was it that stabbed Misty Fey? It looks like you still can't prove it. Maya is telling the truth this time, I know it. The rest is up to me.
Well then, Mr. Wright, proceed with your final cross-examination of the witness.
Okay, erstmal pressen, würde ich sagen. Das ist jetzt das letzte wahrscheinlich. Night of the murder. Just before it happened, I think I saw some red lights. 3 of them. Lights shining in the dark. I don't think you could make a mistake about that.
Yeah, you're right. I think I saw them, but I can't say for certain. And I can't tell you for sure they were from Mr. Godot's mask either.
I don't get the feeling she's covering for him anymore, but... press harder. But just after that, you turned towards the lights and called for help. Isn't that because you thought the lights were coming from Mr. Godot's mask?
Yeah, I guess so. Maybe that's what I was thinking at the time. But I can't remember. After all, there was a person I couldn't identify in front of me.
Maya's life was in terrible danger at the time. There's no way she can remember the details of the scene perfectly.
All right then, let's go on with the testimony. What did you do when you saw the red lights?
I thought I'd asked for help, but just then I was splattered with blood. That blood, was it Dahlia Hawthorne's blood?
I think so, probably. Just at that moment, I heard a soft scream that seemed to be close by.
Yeah, Misty's blood, no?
It was a woman's voice.
So that was when the killer stabbed the victim from behind with a murder weapon. Is that right?
Without a doubt, Maya was in the middle of a really dangerous situation. Anyway, the victim was stabbed by the murder weapon. What happened after that?
She wasn't dead though, and she struck back at the enemy behind her. Wir könnten doch einfach jetzt mal überprüfen, ob Godot irgendwo eine Wunde hat.
Struck back? How do you know that?
Well, you're right. I didn't see it exactly, but I could tell by the sounds of her breathing and movement, and also the smell of blood.
You have witnessed more horror than any young lady should ever have to in one life. So then, what did you do at that point?
I couldn't move. could just barely make out their shadows moving in the dark, but I had no idea what to do.
Could you still see the red lights you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I think so. But suddenly the red lights went out and the whole area was dark.
They went out.
Yes, suddenly I couldn't see them at all.
What could it mean?
If the red lights were coming from Godot's mask, and they went out right in the middle of a fight,
Maybe the mask was damaged.
or maybe it was knocked off. Or maybe the batteries ran out, right, Trite?
Or maybe those little red pinhead-looking lights just stopped working.
What could have really happened then?
Just at that moment, there was a horrible scream.
What do you mean by just at that moment? Do you mean the moment when the red lights went out?
Yes, that's right.
The scream that you heard then, was it Dahlia Hawthorne?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was a man's voice.
What? So then that scream came from the killer?
That's gotta be it.
I think Dahlia Hawthorne must have taken the blade and attacked the killer with it.
And then the killer let out a scream of pain, huh?
After that, the killer stole the blade back and delivered the final blow, I guess.
Well, Mr. Wright, it seems to make sense to me.
It sounds like a reasonable deduction, but I still kind of wonder. There's a ich weiß nicht, ob ich es jetzt Contradiction nennen würde, aber ich wäre jetzt eher der Meinung, dass der Dagger benutzt wurde, um Godot zu verletzen, weil hier steht ja, the blood doesn't match the victims. Das versuche ich mal. I'm sorry to say this, but that interpretation would create an enormous contradiction.
That makes sense. After all, my deductions are almost certainly never correct.
Remember the testimony she just gave before the killer let out a scream. Maya said she had already been splattered by the victim's blood. In other words, the blade and the staff had already been plunged into the victim. Ja, und es hieß ja auch, dass es da nicht wieder rausgezogen wurde, stimmt.
Is that right?
She couldn't have struck back with a sword that was already stuck in her body. The weapon that caused the killer to let out a scream must have been something other than the staff. If you're so sure about that, then don't keep us waiting any longer, Trite. There's only one thing I can think of that could have been used as the weapon here. If Dahlia Hawthorne had already been stabbed in the back by the staff, what could she have used to strike back at the killer? That's it. Naturally, the dagger the killer brought to the scene of the crime.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
This dagger was found at the crime scene stuck into a pine tree. Yes, the detective found that this morning and brought it to me. Dahlia Hawthorne struck back at the killer with this, and she managed to wound him as well. Just because he let out a scream doesn't mean that he was wounded. For all we know, the blood on the dagger could have been from the victim. Have you forgotten that the blood has already been tested? Since we learned it wasn't the victim's blood, it must be the killer's blood. The killer must have a wound somewhere on his body.
So you're saying the blood on this dagger belongs to the killer?
Exactly. The DNA analysis of the blood would prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And yes, Mr. Godot, I would prove that it's your blood. It would prove, right? Nice theory, Trite.
Order in the court.
Is this the end? Have I done it? Even he won't be able to change the results of a scientific test. Huh. Let me ask you something, Trite. Let's just say that it turned out that I was the killer. Do you really think I would be stupid enough to leave evidence like that? What? Just think for a second. This dagger was found this morning by a detective, and brought to me. Das habe ich auch gerade gedacht. Dann hätte der das doch bestimmt verschwinden lassen können. There was already blood on it, correct? But even so, I was the one who brought this dagger here to the courtroom.
Yes, what does that prove?
Well, if I really were the killer, I could have washed the blade off and then planted another person's blood on it.
It can't be. In any case, there's one thing I can guarantee, Tried. That blood, it doesn't belong to me. Not a chance. What? In any event, it seems to be established that the killer was wounded. All right then, witness. Continue your testimony. Huh?
Wait a minute.
What's the problem?
I know I probably shouldn't say this, but that's a big contradiction in Nick's explanation.
But Maya,
This dagger, you said that it wounded the killer,
that's right.
but if Mr. Godot had really been cut with a dagger, his clothes should be bloody or have a rip in them, right?
Maya, maybe he just changed his clothes. That would solve the contradiction pretty easily.
What are you talking about? It's not that simple at all. Remember back to the day of the murder. Everyone that was on the inner temple side got trapped there.
Oh, stimmt. Oh, that's right. And once the bridge was fixed and the police headed for the inner temple,
Mr. Godot was already there, waiting for them. He never had a chance to change his clothes.
Order in the court. What the witness says is true.
Well, maybe he brought a change of clothes with him.
But no one could have predicted the lightning strike that shut down the bridge. Why would anyone have brought a change of clothes?
Did the judge take smart pills during the last recess? Well then, maybe the killer took off his clothes before he committed the murder. That way he wouldn't get any blood on them.
Objection!
That's impossible, Tried. You know how cold it gets out there late at night. After a few minutes with no clothes on, you'd be frozen solid. Huh. So that's all you've got. I knew you weren't tough enough to finish this. Right now, if Mia Fey were here, she would have closed the book on this case already. If Mia Fey were here. So come on, Tried. Can you do it or not? How about it, Mr. Wright? You've accused Mr. Godot of being the killer, but can you prove it? Have you got even one piece of evidence?
The question isn't whether I can prove it or not. The fact is, I have to prove it. That's the only choice I have. Oh, es ist gleich 11 Uhr. Aber ich denke, das können wir jetzt noch zu Ende machen. Ich glaube nicht, dass da jetzt noch so viel kommt. Das wäre ein bisschen doof, wenn wir dann nächsten Montag den Rest davon noch machen und das irgendwie nur noch 10, 20 Minuten geht.
I was taught that it's one of the rules of being a lawyer.
Aber wer jetzt dringend ins Bett muss, kann natürlich dann auch schon ins Bett und sich das später als VOD angucken.
I can prove it. I'm going to bring your magnificent vengeance to fruition, just as you want it. Ha, that's good, a fighter till the bitter end, Tried. Since there's just one piece of evidence that can prove your point, why don't we go for the unlimited penalty?
Oh god. Are you trying to pressure me, Mr. Godot? Because it doesn't matter to me. I've got the one piece of evidence I need. Echt?